Hello, it's Esquily, and today I'm going to be making a video, my first video in quite some time actually on Master Duel, and I just wanted to go over a deck that I've been playing, which is a Demise Ruin Unicore deck. It's a really cool deck. I've been playing it for quite some time now, and initially I was quite hesitant actually about talking about this deck or showing this deck to anybody just because I didn't want to misrepresent what this deck was and make it seem like it's better than what it actually is, because this deck actually does have a number of vulnerabilities that I will highlight throughout this video, but I just wanted to go over real quick before I speak more on the deck and just go over like what this deck actually is and what it's not. So first of all, this deck is primarily, as you can see here, a ritual deck, and what you're trying to do, given the cards that we have here, is with Nekroz Unicore, you're trying to stop your opponent from really playing with their extra deck. So Nekroz Unicore as a card is going to prevent your opponent from activating any effects from monsters that are special summoned from the extra deck, and what you're doing more than anything is by playing this deck, you're surprising your opponent, I think, a little bit, right? I don't know if there's too many people, if anyone, is really playing with this strategy. So with this deck, you're taking people by surprise. Now, what this deck is not is a competitive deck that's going to take you beyond platinum. You could get to platinum with this deck. I've gotten to platinum with this deck, but getting beyond platinum has been a struggle for me. It's been something, I haven't been able to do it, so if other people are able to do it, then that would be great, and I'm sure that better pilots of this deck can absolutely potentially do it. It could be done. I'm not too terribly sure. It's just something that I want to put out there to make sure people know that this isn't a deck that's going to compete at that super high level beyond platinum. It's fine if you're in platinum, you'll win a few games and stuff, but other than that, it's not a deck that, you know, can really compete too much beyond platinum. And then in terms of like what you're actually going to lose to with this deck and like what the vulnerabilities are, they are many. You will lose to things like Lava Golem. You will lose to things like Dark Ruler No More, potentially Sphere Mode, any Kaiju, Forbidden Droplets, and more than that, any type of board break that will just go ahead and like decimate your board. You will lose, right? Just because this deck is so resource intensive that if you're thinking about going into your turn 3, you do want to go turn 1. You do want to go first, so you want to play turn 1, right? And then going into turn 3, your turn 2, you will be using a lot of resources on turn 1, and if you get board broken, you're not really going to have too much to recover from, so keep that in mind. And that's why board breaks like Forbidden Droplets, for example, like Dark Ruler No More, like Lava Golem, can really do a lot of damage to you and spell disaster for the way that you're playing this game. Now, in terms of the actual deck list that we have 40 cards, and so we have Diviner of the Herald, 2 Penciplumes, 2 Manju of the 10,000 Hands, 3 Candolls, 2 Bookstones, 3 Talismandras, 3 Vanity's Rulers, 1 Gameciel, 3 Unicore, 2 Chalislime, 2 Ruin Supreme Queen of Oblivion, 3 Demise Supreme King of Armageddon, Crealtar, Preparation of Rites, Dark Ruler No More, 2 copies of End of the World, 2 Kaleidoscopes, 1 Cycle of the World, 2 Incantation Inception, 1 Called by the Grave, 1 Infinite Impermanence, and then 1 Solemn Judgment. In terms of the extra deck is effectively just filler. There are a few cards that I will go through that are important, but everything in here more or less is just filler, with the exception of Natis, Herald of Arclight, and then Gustav Max. And then you can sometimes get out Nightmare Cerberus and Nightmare Phoenix. I have gotten them out in cases where I'm not sure what to do, and they're cards that do win me duels sometimes, but they are extremely rare exceptions. More often than not, you're going to be wanting to focus on a board going turn 1 that looks like having Unicore in defense position and then having Demise Supreme King of Armageddon in defense position, and that's your board 1. If you could go ahead and get Solemn Judgment in there as well, and Called by the Grave, and set both of those if you have resources, then that's something that could be to your benefit, of course, as well, so definitely do that. But just keep in mind that your ideal board 1 is probably going to look like Nekroz Unicore and then Demise Supreme King of Armageddon. There are situations where you can absolutely 100% get out Ruin Supreme Queen of Oblivion as well. So you'll have a board with Demise, Ruin, and then Unicore, and that's going to be a really good board just because if you're not familiar with these cards' effects, again, Unicore is going to prevent your opponent from actually using any effects from monsters or special summon from the extra deck. It's just going to negate them. And then in terms of Ruin, she's going to protect your cards, your ritual cards, from being destroyed by a card effect, and then Demise is going to protect your cards, your ritual cards, from being destroyed by battle. And then we do have Vanity's Ruler as well, just because the incantation cards really work as a good engine, and they get a lot of cards out onto the field. And so if you're looking for tribute fodder, the incantation cards, when you don't have anything else to do, could be used effectively to get out Vanity's Ruler quite easily. So that's where you have Vanity's Ruler, and sometimes, depending on the deck that you're playing against, being able to just play one Vanity's Ruler and then maybe setting one card like Called by the Grave or Solemn Judgment, and then making your opponent deal with Vanity's Ruler is good enough to allow you to win the game. In some cases it's not. Some cases your opponent will have a response, but in a lot of cases it will be good enough to like win you the game. And then also I just want to add as well, in terms of cards that you lose to, Regeki, you can lose to Regeki really easily as well. Just want to put that out there because it is a quite widely played card, and it will be a card that you will come up against, and it will be a card that you will honestly just lose to, so just please keep that in mind as you're playing this deck. In terms of redundancies that you might encounter with this deck, in terms of thinking about cards that you could get rid of to replace them with other cards, potentially Preparation of Rites could be a card that you could look into removing. Preparation of Rites is only going to get you access to Unicore and Chalislime. We have ample numbers of both of these. We have Chalislime at 2, we have Unicore at 3. You should be seeing Unicore a lot in terms of your opening hand, and you might see Chalislime as well, but keep that in mind if you're looking for things to remove. And then I also want to say that we could think about Diviner of the Herald or Manju the 10,000 Hands as being cards that we could look to remove. These are normal summons, and effectively outside of Vanity's Ruler, they're the only normal summons in our entire deck. What you don't want to see are hands where you have Vanity's Ruler, Manju the 10,000 Hands, and then maybe Diviner of the Herald in your hand, because you're effectively only going to be able to play one of them in your hand. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about maybe like modifying this deck, changing it to suit your needs potentially, or just redundancies that you do want to cut out. That some of these cards here could be things to cut out. And then in terms of thinking about Diviner of the Herald over Manju the 10,000 Hands, both of them effectively do the same thing. It's just that Diviner of the Herald goes through a few extra steps, and then Diviner of the Herald is going to get levels based on the card that you send from the extra deck to the graveyard. So typically with Diviner of the Herald, we're going to be sending Herald of Arclight. Herald of Arclight is going to activate its effect when it's sent to the graveyard. Its effect is going to allow us to get a ritual monster or a ritual spell, add it from the deck to our hand, and then Diviner of the Herald is going to gain levels based on Herald of Arclight, so it's going to go up to 6. And sometimes that is useful, but more often than not, frankly, it's not all that useful, and the effect doesn't really go off in the sense that it gets those extra levels. So just keep that in mind, but it is sometimes useful. Manju the 10,000 Hands just does the same thing effectively a little bit more directly without actually gaining any additional levels, so it's just going to allow you to get a ritual monster or ritual spell from the deck to your hand. So that's effectively the deck profile itself. Again, you should be okay just by playing Nekroz Unicore, setting it, and then Demise Supreme King of Armageddon. That effectively should be enough to get you into a really good position in the duel. And this deck does involve and does play with several assumptions, right? And so the primary assumption is that your opponent is going to be playing with cards from the extra deck, right? If your opponent isn't playing with cards from the extra deck, then you're going to be in a very difficult situation just because your main strategy revolves around Nekroz Unicore, and you'll have to find some way to win the duel given your opponent's strategy not to use the extra deck. The second assumption is that your opponent's boss monsters are from the extra deck, right? So the idea is that anything that will potentially remove a card from play, destroy a card, send a card to the graveyard, send a card back to the hand, is going to be a card that's coming from the extra deck. Now, there can certainly be cards that destroy that are from the main deck, things like spells and traps, absolutely 110%, but the idea is that a lot of players are playing with cards from the extra deck, their boss monsters are from the extra deck, and so Nekroz Unicore is really to protect you from those boss monsters and their effects, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to turn them just into beat sticks, right? It's going to turn them into monsters that might have a lot of attack, right? And that's why we have Demise Supreme King of Armageddon, so we could protect ourselves from those attacks, because Unicore does not have high attack. It's only 2300, So it's susceptible to being overrun by a large attack monster, but having Demise Supreme King of Armageddon prevents that from happening, right? So the only thing ideally that we would really be worried about is being destroyed by battle. Demise Supreme King of Armageddon prevents us from being destroyed by battle. So it's beneficial in that regard. And then again, in some situations, you'll have Ruin out, you'll have Demise Supreme King of Armageddon out, and then you'll have Unicore out turn 1, and then you'll have protection from being destroyed by battle, card effect, and then just you'll negate your opponent's monsters that are special summoned from the extra deck, right? And then if you can't get Ruin out turn 1, and there will be plenty of situations where that won't happen, what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position where you can go ahead and ritual summon Ruin into turn 3, your turn 2, right? That's where you're going to be wanting to be doing for the rest of the turn, right, after you get Demise out and after you get Unicore out. So that's effectively the deck profile, and I'm going to go into a few duels to show you how the deck works, and I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so this is the first of the 2 duels that I want to show you today. When I first got this hand, I wasn't thinking too much about it. I didn't think that I'd actually be able to end up with a board of Demise, Ruin, and Unicore on the field. You'll see how we ended up getting there, but it was something that I wasn't really thinking too much about. And here what we're doing is we're utilizing a really cool interaction between Impcantation Chalislime and Impcantation Inception. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be activating Impcantation Chalislime's effect to send Impcantation Inception to the graveyard. Incantation Inception is going to go into the graveyard, and when it's in the graveyard, you can actually activate its effect to send another incantation monster, either from your hand or to the field, to the graveyard to get another incantation monster out. And so effectively, like, what you're doing is by Incantation Chalislime's effect, you're getting one incantation card out. Through Incantation Inception's effect, when it's in the graveyard, you're getting another incantation monster out, and those two are going to allow you to get whatever you want from the deck or from the graveyard. So you're really generating, I think, a lot of advantage, effectively just at the cost of one Incantation Chalislime, because typically what I do is when I'm activating Incantation Inception's effect, when it's in the graveyard, I'm activating it for Incantation Chalislime to go to the graveyard, then get another incantation monster out, activate its effect, get whatever I want off its effect, and then get Incantation Inception back into the hand. And so that's how I was able to get a board with Ruin, Demise, and Nekroz Unicore out onto the field. I do want to say that this isn't something that's incredibly common. Like, this actually is quite rare. This is something that you can do. It's just, again, it's uncommon. It's not something that's going to happen all the time, so please keep that in mind. But this is going to give us some really good protection against our opponent, right? So we're negating any effects that are coming from the extra deck, right, with Nekroz Unicore. We're preventing our opponent from destroying us by card effect with Ruin, and we're affecting our opponent's ability to destroy us through battle with Demise Supreme King of Armageddon, so we can't be destroyed by battle. So we're going to just watch our opponent here play out their hand, do what they can do, and this is effectively like what you're trying to do with this deck, right? This is effectively like the best case scenario with this deck, where you're just going to be sitting here watching your opponent go through their plays, trying to watch them figure out how they're going to really overcome your board, right? And the devious thing about Nekroz Unicore is that Nekroz Unicore isn't an activated effect, it's just a condition that effectively applies onto the field. So if your opponent is actually looking at the log and is trying to figure out, okay, well, why did my card get negated, right? It's not going to tell them what negated the effect, right? It's just going to say that their effect got negated, right? So it's devious in that regard. And there's instances where your opponent might, for instance, they'll activate an effect, they'll pay cost only for that effect to be negated. So it really makes your opponent look at your deck, look at your cards, and really read the text to figure out what's going on. And each 3 of these cards on the field that we have on our control are doing different things. So our opponent's going to swing into us here, they're not going to be able to do anything, and then we're just going to be able to activate Demise's effect to blow up the field and then swing for game. And it's honestly, in some cases, like, it's just as simple as that. As you see here, we don't draw into anything good, so it's not like we could do anything anyway. We have wasted so many resources, right, trying to get into this hand in the first place, but it doesn't really matter. We're very easily able to just go over their board with Demise's effect, and again, we don't even care about the effects of any of their monsters that are special summoned from the extra deck, just because they become negated. So we're able to activate Demise's effect, and as long as they don't have anything in their hand that would negate the effect or prevent the effect from going off, we're just able to go ahead and run them down. and win the duel. It's quite simple in that regard. And so yeah, so that's duel number 1, and I'll go into duel number 2. Okay, so here we are back for duel number 2. And so this is an instance where I think actually like we end up doing okay, and this is a curious like situation here. Like you'll see how things end up like playing out in terms of the way that we play this, but what we're doing is we're doing the same thing that we did before in the last duel. We are playing with Inception and Chalislime. We're using their effects to be able to get out what we want, and the nice thing about Incantation Chalislime and Inception, if you have both of them in your hand, they effectively like can make Demise and Ruin. It doesn't really matter like what else you have in your hand, as long as you have both of those cards, you're going to be able to get out what you want and end up with the ritual monster that you want. But this is a situation where nevertheless we're just going to end up with a board of Demise and Nekroz Unicore, and we're going to end up setting Called by the Grave. And so we know a little bit about what our opponent is playing in terms of like just based off of like what they're going to have. They're going to reveal to us Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. We know a little bit about what's going to happen now. So I'm going to take this opportunity to actually go ahead and Called by the Grave, Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon. And this is a really good play actually here in the situation. We are playing this card Called by the Grave at a 1. So we're not playing it at 2 at its maximum capacity. So we were a little bit, I think, fortunate in terms of us being able to get Called by the Grave in our opening hand, but we got it, and so we were able to activate its effect, and that actually helps us out a lot, just because with Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, it is a problem against this deck, right? Like it can present a very big challenge to us when we are playing this game, so just keep that in mind. And it was just, I think, a really good play to be able to negate that effect and then prevent its effects from actually being used when it comes back into play. And then from that point on, we just sit here and we kind of like wait for our opponent to go through their plays, activate whatever effects they want to activate, go into battle phase, and effectively pass turn into turn 3, into our turn. And as you see here in our hand, we have Impcantation Chalislime and we have Incantation Inception. And again, we set ourselves up very well, so that way going into our next turn, we're just going to be able to activate their effects to go into Ruin, Supreme Queen of Oblivion, so we could blow up the board without getting rid of any of our additional ritual monsters and attack for game. And here you see that their effects got negated. They weren't able to do too much from there, but they did have to pay costs. They did have to detach. They did everything without being able to activate their effects. This person's going to try and activate the effect of their XYZ monster. Again, Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord. It's not going to work. Again, Nekroz Unicore prevents the effect from actually being resolved and negates it. So it's really good. And here I was just playing around, right? Like I don't think I did the most optimal thing in terms of like getting more cards into my hand, right? I ended up getting with 2 Inceptions in my hand, which like what am I going to do with that, right? But we're just gonna, all we need really is a way to get into Ruin, and we were able to get to Ruin very easily, no problem at all, right? And we're just going to blow up the board and then finish off the game is what we're going to do here. And my opponent doesn't have anything in their hand, so I know that we're safe, and we can just go ahead and attack for a game. And really, that's all it is. It really is that simple sometimes. Your opponent just isn't going to have a response to it. Again, you're operating off the assumption that your opponent is really going to be relying heavily on the extra deck, and if they are, Nekroz Unicore is going to take care of that. So yeah, that's the second duel, yeah, I'll just finish the video off real quick. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed those duels. It was just a little bit of a flavor, I suppose, in terms of like what this deck can actually do, what it can accomplish, and I hope you enjoyed it, right? If there's any like questions or comments that you have about the deck, please let me know. And I also want to hear if anybody has any suggestions or ideas of ways to improve this deck, right? I really like hearing if there's any ideas, right, on ways that this deck could actually get better, if we can improve consistency, if there's anything that can be done to just make the deck overall a better deck. I know I didn't show a duel where we actually made use of Vanaity's Ruler. It doesn't come up too often. You do have to hard draw it, right? There isn't really a way for you to find Vanaity's Ruler, but it does come up from time to time, and when it does come up, you will probably win the duel, unless again you do get board broken with anything like Lightning Storm or Regeki or maybe even Dark Hole, to be honest. But yeah, that is the deck. I hope you enjoyed, and again, I'm sorry that I took so long between my last few Yu-Gi-Oh videos and actually making this video, there's just been some things happening, so I haven't been able to really work on this. And again, I was a little bit sheepish about it just because I didn't want to present a deck that would deceive people into making them think that this deck was better than what it actually is, right? It is a good deck. I think it's a fun deck. It will surprise your opponents, but again, please don't think that you can take this deck beyond Platinum. I mean, if you can, great, that's fantastic, but I do think that there is a limit in terms of what this deck can do, right? And there are certain matchups that you will just lose against, right? So for example, Labyrinth, you will probably just lose to Labyrinth, right? There is no way that I've been able to really like fight against Labyrinth convincingly. So there are some matchups, right, that just do not work well with this deck. So please keep that in mind. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a good time playing Master Duel. And if you do try and play this deck, please let me know, you know, how it went. I hope you have fun. I hope you enjoy it. It is an expensive deck. There are a lot of ultra rares here. So if you don't have like the core of Demise and Ruin, right, then you will have to craft a little bit. And if you want to go for a budget option, you do not have to go with Divine or the Herald. You could just play with 3 Manjus, right? So but yeah, that's effectively the deck. Dark Ruler no more, by the way, is just in here if we're going turn 2, right? Just with Master Duel, you know, there might not always be, we might not know like whether or not we're going to go first or second, so just having that as like an extra guarantee, right, of us being able to negate effects that are on the board so we could go into our plays, right, is really good. So yeah, so that's the deck. Again, I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, I'll see you all next time. Take care. Bye.